I'm Emily Lutzker.
And I'm Anna Kamasia.
We are excited to announce that International Arrivals is now a fiscally sponsored project with New York Foundation for the Arts, and any donations you make are now tax deductible. The easiest way to donate is to click the donate button on our website, internationalarrivals.org.
Perfect.
Today, International Arrivals speaks with interdisciplinary Iranian-American artist Golnar Adili. This podcast today is in partnership with the Immigrant Artist Biennial. Welcome, Golnar. It's so nice to have you here on our podcast, so thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be talking to you, Anna.
And I know we're happy to catch you because you are a busy woman. You're teaching, you have a daughter, you're teaching at university and at middle school, you were saying?
Yeah. Yes, it's true. And I'm so, I feel lucky to be able to talk to you because this is important to me.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that we're able to catch you. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess maybe we can start with, because this is in partnership with the Immigrant Artist Biennial, maybe we could start by asking you about your project for the exhibition Conflictual Distance, which I believe opens on November 16th at Ep8 Project Space. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the work that's included in that exhibit.
Sure. There's one piece that I'm contributing, and it's called The Pink Letter. And it's a horizontal piece that sits on maybe like a pedestal or table surface. And it is my mother's letter to my father a few months after he left Iran. He escaped Iran in 81. And it's I recreated that letter in folds. So the surface of the letter is all folded, which required some calculations and simple formulas and testing. I had to enlarge the piece, print it, then stagger the cuts, cut it into strips, stagger the cuts, and fold them so you could see the whole letter recreated on folds. And that was responding to a desire to give depth to this surface. I can give you a little bit of background about where this letter comes from and how I got to work with it.
So you're still able, I just had a question about the letter. So you're still able to read the letter. It's just that it is, so you've made the folds in such a way that you can actually read the surface, but see that there's depth below it.
Yes. So that's a very interesting question because it is a big part of this whole project that I did not actually, I intended on being able to read it at the end. So no parts missing. But when I finished it, which was, it took a few months because it was a very labor intensive project. And when I finished it, in order to read it, I had to walk around it, bend, and change angles. And it was not easy to read it. And it was with difficulty, which is, I realized at that moment that it really translated my relationship to the letter in the first place. Because it was very emotional to read this thing. And I wanted to read it, but I couldn't read it in the beginning.
Right.
That tension pool was very much translated in the final piece, which is one of those wonders of art and the unconscious, I feel like.
Yeah, and then the audience then experiences that bodily, no, that's not a word, but in their bodies, that of trying to understand the letter and come to terms with the letter themselves in a very physical way.
Right. And that is if you can read Persian.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can't really read it, but I think that you can understand that it's language and that it was reconstructed and this body reference is interesting because the size of the letter is something around, I want to say 20 by 24, maybe something like that. which is kind of the size of the torso. So your body does make a relationship to it. It's larger than the original piece, maybe twice as large, or maybe a little bit more. But me and my family, we did a reverse migration when the revolution happened, meaning when, the month of the revolution, we all went back to Iran because my parents were activists fighting against the Shah's regime. There were leftists, Maoists, and they met in the university and they had me. And so when I was 3, the revolution happened, and my dad was pretty radical activist, and he went back the minute he could go back. And, in the hope of building a leftist utopia in Iran. And we followed my father by a month. And so shortly, 1 year after that, the war happened. Iraq bombed the international airport in Tehran out of the blue. And I remember my father then went to war to defend. And already he was being pursued and pursued by the regime because he was a leftist activist. And as you may know, the plan for the revolution didn't go as planned by the leftists. It was pretty much hijacked by the religious leadership of Khomeini, and the Islamic Republic of Iran was established. And then they turned around and suppressed all other parties. And so, but it was all happening so fast that my dad went to the war, and from there he understood that they are going to get him. So he came back to Tehran and was in hiding. Then after a year or a few months, he could escape. And then my mother was writing these letters to my father, and I was writing these letters. And I literally remember the afternoon where my mother was writing on this translucent pink paper, and I was also writing to him. And fast forward, let's say 20 years later, I finally had joined my father in the US, was going to the university. And then he got this very horrific cancer that he died at a young age. And I, as an only child, was left, when I was cleaning his apartment, was left with I found this stash of huge archive of letters and photographs, and even letters that he would send out, he would copy, and so organized as if he wanted to tell a story. So at that moment, and being very sad, I couldn't deal with it. So I boxed it though and I marked it. And 10 years later, I finally had the strength, emotional strength, to go and read these, because I knew I wanted to process and learn and read and see what happened. Thankfully, he had told me the story once, only one time, when I asked him, so I could piece things together in a better way. So this letter that I work with is one of the first letters that I was carrying around, crying, not knowing what to do with it, but I just knew I wanted to do something with it. So that was what I ended up doing with it, to deconstruct it and reconstruct it.
And can I ask about the content of the letter?
Oh my God, it's very emotional. My mother is partly mad at my father, partly just expressing frustration.
Because she's in Tehran and he's in America.
He finally made it to the US, which was amazing, in one piece. And she's saying, basically saying how much she misses him, how lonely it is, how she doesn't know when she's going to see him, how I'm being very, very difficult. And even for a patient person like her, I'm completely exhausting her patience. And I miss my father, and that's why I'm being difficult. And even giving my father some parenting tips, like, read this book because we need to build her confidence back up, which is very, very poignant, but also interesting.
And so did your mom come back did your mom come to America with you when you were 20?
No, because they kept not giving her a visa. America would never give her a
Oh,
visa because there was this, your husband and ex-husband and all of your family lives in the US. You have a child who's a US citizen, therefore you will go and stay there. Of course.
um,
That's why we're not going to give you a visa. So finally, I got her a green card because there is this law that if you are a US citizen, you can give your parents residency after the age of 21. So I applied myself for her.
okay. And so then you all came here, but at that point, I think before when you told me the story, they were no longer together. Is that correct?
Yes, the marriage was always rocky, but then when forced separation happened, there was a moment where my mom could have, exactly like how I gave my mom residency, she could have gotten residency from her mother because her mother was a US citizen, lived in the US. But because she was married, she couldn't get residency from her. So they get a divorce in order for her to get residency through her mother, and then her mother dies.
Oh my goodness, it's complicated.
Complicated.
It's complicated. Wow.
Yes.
So, but then she came, so when you were 21, and is she still here now?
Yes. So she came when I was 21, thankfully, and she's still here.
Okay. And so that puts you in a really interesting position when you think of yourself. Do you think of yourself as more American or as more Iranian? Or do you like feel as if you were caught between the two?
I think of myself as Iranian just because I grew up in Iran those very important years,
Yeah.
3 to 18. Um, and even when I was here as a baby or toddler, I was born into an Iranian household where they spoke Farsi and Persian. And so, but it doesn't mean that when I go back to Iran, I completely fit in because even when I was growing up there, I had a very different story and I'd seen different things. And
Right.
so, and I always like within the diaspora here in the US, I don't quite fit the profile because I did this reverse migration and I don't have
Mhm.
a story. When I'm in Iran, I also have a very different story. So I am this in between. I feel very in between, but really deep down inside, I feel very Iranian.
Right. And and you use so much of your own life and particularly the life of your parents for your artwork. And so I wondered how is it do you use mainly the letters between your parents or are there other ways that you incorporate their lives into your work too?
Um, the letters, photographs, are the main kind of materials that I mine for my work. For that portion of my work, not all of my work has to do with this, but this constitutes a big part of it for sure. Kind of
Right.
investigating my past, and then kind of finding that as a pathway into investigating my parents as people, which I think I was always very interested in personal history. Um,
Mhm.
and I have a very deep memory. I remember when I was crawling, I remember the US very well, the suburbs which I was born into. And so, I feel like I have so much memory and visual memory that it just is it's kind of fun to go into memory and try to work with it because it's kind of foggy and
Mhm.
euphoric. And so I find that just really interesting.
And again, it sort of aligns itself with the way that you manipulate the letter in terms of thinking about the depth of the letter and what's translatable or what's readable and what's not readable. And I think that that also stands as a metaphor for memory in some ways of like what parts you remember, what parts you don't, what parts are accessible, what parts aren't. In the same way that you're talking about it being kind of blurry and parts are not all as readable or as knowable.
Totally. I like what I did with this pink letter piece. I like to give the image depth because
Mm-hmm.
I think it also might be a reaction to this age, in this age and time, we have so many images, right? That is very surface. And I find it really bland in a way, and also too much, too saturated. And so this is my way of saying, okay, I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to go inside of it. And
Mhm.
because there could have been other ways of manufacturing depth or folds or distortion, I guess.
Yeah.
But the way I did it is if you like pick apart the folds, you see that the letter extends inside. So the relationship also of inside and outside is very important to me, or interesting to me. Um,
And does that for you relate to the body? Because I think that you also have some images of your own body in your work. Is that right?
yes, I do. I always loved the body.
Like this
But
idea of interiority and exteriority and what's shown and what's seen.
yeah, this is very interesting to me. And also, I think my background in architecture really, really kind of brought that out as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the way I started to work with a specific imagery, which is my own chest image, is I read this beautiful poem, which is also another connection to back to my culture, and deciding to also, when I decided to work with my own life story, because I came to art kind of in a nonlinear fashion and as a process of elimination, because it was culturally not really available to me to become an artist. So I tried to do all kinds of functional things, and it was problematic because I loved everything, and I like, yeah, I want to become a doctor. I love science or
Right.
architecture, but architecture seemed like a really interesting place where science and art come together, or at least that was my first superficial attempt and inspiration to pursue it. But so when I decided to do art, I was 30, and I had done everything else and nothing just seemed to fit. I was very unhappy in the office that I was working, but I really loved the education of architecture. It gave me a lot of interesting tools. And then so I decided to, actually I got this grant from University of Michigan that I could only get in that 1 year because I had to be under 30 and I had to have graduated, which was the case. And
Perfect.
yeah, and I got this grant. I said, if I get this grant, this will be my ticket out of architecture. And I proposed in architecturally to go and look at here's another inside outside, the discrepancy between inside spaces of Tehran and outside spaces. So inside you could do whatever you want, not have hijab on, and then when you go outside, you were watched, so you had a
Oh,
double life.
and the public private also.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I proposed that, and then I went there and I just hung out with a bunch of cool photographers, and I just would go here and there and party and go outside of the city, come inside, and sometimes outside spaces like the mountain was like an inside, right? So I was playing with these ideas, and that
Right. Because you were free in the sense of like nobody was watching you. You didn't have to behave a particular way, that you could behave and do what you wanted in those spaces.
exactly. So
Right.
inside the car, in the mountain, outside of the city, inside your home, these are all inside spaces or free spaces. Uh,
Hmm.
so, that a whole process of collage came out of that, where I would set inside and outside side by side each other. That led to abstraction, to time investigation, time and space investigations. And, but then the first idea, so I came back and I really pursued my arts. And the first thing that I wanted to look at when I wanted to understand my language and art, or began to understand it, was I really wanted to work with this tightness and this heaviness that I felt on my chest growing up because of all these separations. Now that I'm older and now that I have a child and I look back to my own life, I'm quite scared now because I'm like, wow, the things that I went through was very heavy for a
Hmm.
human being, for a child, for someone growing up. So, and then I found that same longing resonating in Persian poetry. So I started to work with poetry just then. And going back to the body, there was this beautiful short poem by this very strange poet, Iranian contemporary poet who just passed away 2 years ago, I think, Yadollah Royai. And it was the poem was very short, kind of about mortality, and or I think it was, and it opens with this beautiful stanza that says, 1,000 pages of chest and 1,000 pages of mirror. One body is finite, bodies become infinite. So I just really grabbed onto that 1,000 pages of chest and 1,000 pages of mirror. And, they both have mirror and chest. There are motifs that repeat in Persian poetry, classical Persian poetry, but now this is a contemporary and new poetry. But I was like, wow, reflecting chests, and so a whole series came out of that. And, on top of that, I love sensuality, the chest, the breast, and I wanted to really work with it as a self-portrait. But the fact that it kept generating new imagery and ideas, I found also fascinating. So I just went with it.
And how does the mirror function in that? Does it?
Yeah, so the mirror really became about fragmentation. Fragmenting and reconstructing, and that distortion to me is the mirror part. I haven't yet tried to put anything reflective in there, but maybe
maybe that's next. Yeah. But this idea, I guess, of deconstructing, and that's I noticed something on your website, as you said, as an Iranian American growing up in post 1979 Tehran, I've experienced separation and uprooting in its different manifestations. In my practice, I distort and amplify these past events through material deconstruction and reconstruction. And so I think that aligns so well with everything that you've already talked about. But I also like this idea how you've discussed the mirror as a tool for fragmenting, sort of reflecting, or endless reflections, if you will, or a mirror can reflect in so many different ways, but this breaking up rather than a holistic image.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because when you say holistic image, I actually, when I break, because sometimes you can break things apart and not put them all back together.
Right.
But I really want to put everything back together. I don't that's why instead of weaving, I collage in a way that you can see everything. And so, if I may self-analyze, I'm really interested in making everything whole again. But then, that those cuts and folds and displacements, they make a mark, right? Which are beautiful, but it's the truth, kind of. So I feel like I'm very, how do you say, I want to put everything back and all of it, I don't want to lose anything. So
right. But I just wondered how that then relates to archives, I guess, and your use of archives, of wanting to piece it all back together. Is it sort of this? Yeah.
So when I actually went through the archive, I went through I think 2 years of depression because it was very hard to take everything back again, to go through it and understand it and process it. And then I was also left with this question of so now what do I do with it? I've spent all this time looking at it. I almost lost everything through Hurricane Sandy because I was a resident at Smackmelon, and it just, there was a big flood and everything was flooded, but thankfully we could save at least the letters and a lot of the photos. And, after 10 years of carrying from storage to storage these books and memorabilia, I finally take it to a residency and then it gets flooded. And then I rushed to digitize everything, and McDowell gave me just unsolicited space and time to do that. And then I did that. So then I had all this, and then I was like, okay, so what do I do with this now? And, as an only child, there's no other person watching me. I have this almost burden, but at the same time, I'm interested in this burden. And so So then after a while, I was like, you know what, Golnar, you do with it what you do with everything else, which is my way of processing is taking everything apart and putting it back together, deconstruction and reconstruction. And um, so I was like, but where do I go? Like, is this a systematic process or is this like willy-nilly, you know? So I was
Right.
really torturing myself on this. And then
The
I was like,
architect and the artist in you.
exactly. Then I was like, just do whatever you feel like doing. And then I gave myself freedom to do that. And I went to the, to this really long letter and I worked with it. And then I went to that really long letter and worked with it. And then I went to that picture and worked with it. And sometimes I was like, oh, this is too much. I want to get away from it. So archive is just nonlinear in this sense.
Mm.
And it is a very personal investigation, right? There's nothing documentarist about this.
Right. Do you have you taken these letters to your mom?
So
Is that a big question?
yeah, this is a very big question, very interesting question. I'm still grappling with. So remember I told you I woke up after 10 years. So after 10 years, I went back to these boxes in the storage to look at them finally closely. And it was incredible because I literally woke up in the middle of the night knowing and thinking, okay, tomorrow's the day.
Mm.
I'm going exactly 10 years. I'm going to go and look at these. And so first thing I grab onto was this pink letter that was so raw and emotional from my mom to my dad. And I carried this around and I cried. I mean, this is what I did for a long time. And I said, my gosh, she's been through so much. Even if I want to work with this, how can I? Like, it's all her emotions, you know?
Yeah.
So I called her. I remember I called her. I was like, Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm carrying this around and it's like this, and you say this, and I'm just so sorry for what you went through. And it was oddly, I was at the same age that that she was writing the letter. And
amazing.
yeah, I mean, all these like I don't know, coincidences and parallels always blow my mind. And so she was like, my mom is funny because she's like opposite of me, kind of non-sentimental, or maybe she had to become this way. But so, oh, Golnar, that's such a long time ago. I don't care anymore, you know. And when she said that, it just was like really like pouring good cold water on fire. It was good in a good way, you know. I was like, okay, so I again, I had that freedom to work with it emotionally.
Right. And did she have the equivalent on her end of the letters from your dad?
No.
So she was not sentimental. So those just went in the bin or whatever.
But I know them because before my dad would send them out, he would make a copy.
Oh, wow.
A very, very complete archive. I can't even tell you.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
So I know both sides.
Right.
And he continued to do this with all of his letters.
What an incredible archive to have.
Yes. So this is why it made me think, did he want to tell a story?
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes me think that, right? Looking at all this.
I think maybe there's a film here.
But you don't even know half of it. We can have a chat later.
Okay.
about that. But this relationship was toxic, very toxic. And he became very depressed and I don't know. And so I found all these letters also to this person and nothing really back from them, but all to this person. And reading those was very difficult as well, like maybe even more difficult because I love my father so much and very protective of him, always longing to be with him. And so I kind of saw this relationship as not being very good for him at all.
And such an interesting position to be in to know your parents' inner thoughts too. That's something that's not afforded to a lot of people or shared with a lot of people, or definitely usually not parents sharing it with their children. So it's an interesting position that you've placed yourself in also.
Well, it's interesting because like my father had a little bit of loose boundaries, like, but also it was interesting because we were friends, like
Mm,
how much you should be friends with your kids. And but I really enjoyed being his friend. And so I knew a lot already because I was in it. And he would share with me a little bit about his heartbreaks. And sometimes I didn't want to hear about it.
right.
But then, I was 18, 20. And then when I grew up and I was like 26, and then I was in my early 30s when I was reading these, I was in my 30s. And I was like, oh my God, I had a completely different understanding of what was happening.
Hmm.
Feelings about this relationship, and they were all confirmed. But yeah, it was a very, very strange position to be in for sure.
Yeah. And so back to my initial question though, are there other moments so that you grasp onto in his life?
I mean, I see my father activist who, because he also had all these letters to his comrades, and I cannot believe how complex this net of activists were that they got all scattered around the world after the revolution. Um, and these really close bonds, they cared for each other as family. And that's really how my father saw his comrades, and humanity is really that was his big family. So that kind of gave me a really interesting sense of myself being his daughter. I felt this like big community around me. And I'd already felt that during his life and when he died at his funeral, because so many people came. But also other, he had other interests, like all cultural, like he had so many notes about linguistics, so many notes
Oh,
about teaching, about being a pedagogue, because he was a very good teacher. And like totally immersed in everything progressive, intellectual, political, very political person. And and having and knowing so much about the African struggle, the Latin American struggle, anti-imperialist, of course. And just having his hand in all these communities, and being engaged and writing, and also he was also a presenter of, I came across many documents, and I already knew that because I was in it, but he would conduct towards the end, like the last 15 years of his life, he would bring in Persian classical musicians to the DC area and organize concerts because he loved Persian classical music. So that was another big community that he was connected to. So a very busy person
mhm.
who had all these like activities that I could see through these documents, even more so. Because of course I was around it too toward when I came to the US, but to just find how the correspondences, all the planning, down to like ticket sales and distribution, and he did all of this as his passion work, really.
Wow.
What
What an amazing person. He sounds like an amazing person.
Thank you. He really was, and and he had like this interior design slash renovation business that was his moneymaker, and then he was just doing all these projects on the side. So
That really were his passion projects.
exactly.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your, I'm not sure of the title. I was just trying to find the title, the Family History Woodblock Project.
That actually ended up being named, the book was She Feels Your Absence Deeply, which is a sentence extracted from my mother's letter, the same pink letter. Yes,
Can you talk a little bit about it for our listeners?
sure. So when I had my daughter, I just became so interested in these puzzles and wood blocks and games. Um, and I wanted to, one day I was looking at these blocks, just loving them. And I was like, oh my God, I can put my own imagery on the sixth side of the block. And kind of, uh, and then that becomes almost a teaching tool, or a way that I transfer knowledge or memory to my daughter. Um, and just seeing how to make this into my own was really exciting. So I decided to do that, and I made it very specific about these years. This one year, 81, when my father left. So I had a picture of me and him the last day that he spent with me in Tehran. He just, because he wasn't living with us, he was in hiding. He just comes unannounced, takes me to the park, spends a whole day, and there's a park photographer taking a photo of us. So there's that. There's me and my mom's picture in a birthday party, and my mom, I was 5, and my mom looks very sad. The gaze, again, I'm really interested in her gaze in these years, because I think that the eyes tell so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, on another side of the block, I have her passport photo before we went to Iran, and then after my dad left, and I'm doing a comparative study there, and then I zoom into her eyes. So these are the 6 things, and also a piece of the letter that has "She feels your absence deeply" title. And so the book is like this folding box, folds into a box, opens flat, and holds these blocks inside of it. And then there is a panel that describes what each image is and what the story of this is. Just I'm telling you. And so that was published through an artist grant residency with Women's Studio Workshop. And I made 50 editions, and they are all sold.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful book, and it's so beautifully done.
Thank you.
I saw it when I came to your studio, and it's been with me. I've carried it with me because I just think it's a very beautiful. And again, the title?
She feels your absence deeply.
It's beautiful. She feels your absence deeply.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sort of feels like a good point to wrap. I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for sharing about your work. A pleasure to hear you talk about your life and your work.
Thank you so much. It's been really lovely talking with you, Anna.
It's always really fruitful talking with you too, Golnar. Thank you. So if you want to find out more about Golnar and her work, you can visit golnaradili.com, GOLNARADILI.com. And you can experience her work at the opening at Ep8 on November 16th, called Conflictual Distance. Thank you.
Welcome.
You have arrived at your destination.
Wenn Sie auf den Hof legen.